Well, this video is going to be a little different from most of my videos because what I want to do is I want to go into Excel and go into the options. And I want to go through some of these categories and showcase certain features that to me are either features that I don't use and I want to turn off or features that I would like to use and I turn them on. But some of these features are bordering on the use of prank. And I'll let you decide whether something is actually a feature or a potential practical joke that you might want to play on one of your Excel buddies. So the first thing I want to show you is actually very useful, and that is if you spend a lot of time in the options, turning things on or off or experimenting, getting to the options is several clicks because we have to go up to File, we have to go down to Options, and then we have to get into this area. Well, what if we were to add that Options feature to our Quick Access toolbar? I'll cancel this. Now, I'll just show you where this feature is located, but if you would like a much more in-depth examination of customizing the Quick Access toolbar, check out the link in the video description for my video on the ultimate guide of customizing the QAT, or just click the link up there in the corner of the video. So I'll start by clicking the small arrow at the right side of the Quick Access toolbar and go down to More Commands. What we want to do is we want to switch this from Popular Commands to the File tab. And if we scroll down, we'll see Options is about halfway down the list. I'll give that a double click and move that to the right side of the dialog box. I'll hit OK. And so now anytime we want to go to our options, we could just go up here and give it a click, and we're right where we need to be. There are dozens and dozens of features in this options section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on 19 features that I think you might want to either turn on, turn off, or maybe think about using for pranks. And of course, if somebody were to prank you with one of these features, you know how to deal with it. The real impetus behind this video was because there were certain features that I would use that would all of a sudden stop working and I wouldn't know why. And come to find out, those features were getting turned off in the options. Not because somebody was pranking me, but sometimes, for unknown reasons, sometimes the features just stop working. So here's how you can sort of give them a little kick in the pants. We'll begin with the general category. And this option right here, collapse the Microsoft search box by default. The search box is this guy right up here at the top in the title bar. Now for me, that search box takes up a lot of space and I don't use it that often. The search box is very useful for beginners when they're trying to locate features, or if you're just trying to find something in the data. Now since when I'm looking for something in the data, I usually use the Find dialog box because it has more features. So I don't find myself using the search box very often. And since this does take up so much space, it really limits how much space I can give to my customized Quick Access toolbar. So I'm going to collapse the Microsoft search box by default. I'll hit OK. And so now that's been reduced to just this magnifying glass. You give that a click, you can get your search box back. But when you're not using it, you don't have to occupy all that space. Let's go back into the options. The next feature in the general category is the screen tip style. Now, screen tips are what you see when you hover over a particular button. So it'll give you the name of the feature and usually a nice explanation of what that feature is for. Now, another thing you'll get when you hover over a feature is if that feature has a keyboard shortcut associated with it, it will also show that keyboard shortcut. So in this case, clear contents is the same thing as hitting the delete key. If I were to hover over the bold button, Control B is the keyboard shortcut for bold. Now hovering over something like the Format Painter, this creates a rather long list of instructions. Now if you don't need these instructions, and maybe sometimes they get in your way because then you can't see the underlying data, we can go back into our options, and under Screen Tip Style, we can change this to Don't Show the Feature's Descriptions. Hitting OK. Now if I were to hover over the Format Painter, all we get is the name of the button. If I hover over the B button, all I get is the name and the shortcut, but I don't get a description of what that button is for. Now I actually quite like the descriptions, but I'm showing you this in case you inherit a machine where somebody's turned this off and you wonder why you don't have the more verbose descriptions. Well, we can just go back into the options and then change this to show features and descriptions. Of course, if you want to prank somebody, you could just shut the feature completely off. So now when I hit OK, if I hover over a button, I don't get anything. So if somebody pranked you, you'd know to go back into your options and just change this switch. The next thing you might wish to customize is the font that you're going to use in Excel. Not only is this the default font for typed data, but it's also the font that your columns and rows will use. So if I were to go in here and change the default font to something like Lucida Calligraphy, I'll hit OK. Now this type of change does require a restart, so let me restart real quick. And now I'm using the Lucida Calligraphy font. Now, I don't think I would need this type of elegance in my column headings, but if you want to have a little fun with somebody, let's say we were to go back into our options and change our default font to something like Wingdings 3. Well, now when we restart, now we've got some quite interesting row and column headings. Let me zoom in on this. So imagine firing up your computer and getting this for your row numbers or this for your column headings. I think I might be a little concerned. We'll go back into options, change that back to body font, which is the default, hit OK, and restart. And now we're back to quote-unquote normal. Now I zoomed in, so I'm going to zoom back out to 100%. One of the things I like to do for training purposes, or if I'm recording videos, is I like to enlarge the font size in the row and column headings and the font size for my formula bar so people can see what I'm typing in the formula bar more easily. Well, if we go into the options, our default font size is 11 points. So what I like to do is change that to 22, basically double the size. Now this is a restart required option, but now if I'm teaching or recording a video, users can see what I'm typing much more easily. I've talked about this feature in other videos because I find it quite useful. Now keep in mind, you're not just altering the font size of the row and column headings, you are also altering the default font size for the cells themselves. So if you don't want 22-point font when you send this to somebody else, you might want to change your font size. Let's go back to options. Our last feature in the general section is all the way at the bottom, and that is show the start screen when this application starts. Whenever you start Excel, and this is true for Word and PowerPoint as well, you land on this thing called the Getting Started page. And this allows you to choose a direction you want to go in, like start a blank workbook, maybe pick something from the history, start something from the template library, or maybe browse out and find some file on the network. But I know some people kind of like to go old school, and when they start Excel, they just want to start with a blank workbook every single time. So if you want to bypass that Getting Started screen, in the options, under General, all the way at the bottom, we can deselect the Show Start Screen when this application starts. This way, when we restart Excel, we just start in a new workbook, and we save a few clicks. Plus, the program starts a little faster. Next up, customizing the formula set of controls. We'll go back into Options, and then switch to the Formulas category. Now, this is a feature I would not recommend turning off, but in case yours stops working, you'll know where to investigate, and that is the Formula AutoComplete. AutoComplete gives us access to the IntelliSense system, sort of like a predictive text on your cell phone. Now, to demonstrate this, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, if I type in equals and hit the letter V, I get a list of all functions that start with V. But if I hit the letter A, I reduce that list to all functions that start with VA. So whether you're doing something like L for lookup or B for base, it's a nice way to just scroll down and find a function and hit tab. Now, if I was doing something like a VLOOKUP, this would also give me the pop-up that shows me all the arguments for that function. So I've got the lookup array, I've got the table array, the column index number, and the range lookup. And if any of these arguments have options, you'll also see those presented. I find this incredibly useful, especially for functions that I don't use every day and I need a little bit of a reminder. Well, if we go into the options and go to Formula and deactivate the Formula AutoComplete, hit OK. Now if I type in equals V, I don't get any assistance. So I have to type in the whole thing. Now if I start my arguments list, I will still get that pop up. That's a separate control. I'm going to hit Escape. Going back into the options, Formulas, you can actually toggle this feature on and off by holding down your Alt key and pressing the down arrow. So currently this is on. If I hit OK, so if I go back into Excel and I begin typing in a formula and I see the autocomplete, if I don't want that, I can hold down Alt and press down arrow and turn that feature off. I'll hit Escape. We go back into Options, Formulas, that feature is deselected. Back in Excel, if I type in equals anything and do another Alt down arrow, I can turn the feature back on. So you can do this in the options, or you can just do this within Excel with Alt down arrow. So if you're typing in a formula and you're not getting any assistance, Alt down arrow. See if that corrects the issue. Going back to Options, Formulas, the other thing you might wish to turn off are the error checking rules. Now, error checking rules are great if you're a beginner because they help you identify where you may have gone astray and done something that Excel thinks is a little out of the ordinary. The problem is I do a lot of out of the ordinary things in Excel, and I don't like Excel to keep harassing me saying, hey, I think you screwed this up. So all these error checking rules, you may wish to examine them and decide if it's something that you actually need assistance with. And if you're not sure what a particular feature does, you could just hover over the feature and get some help. And some of these help pop-ups can be quite verbose. So I leave it up to you to decide which of these you need and which you don't. Now let's move on to the data category. For anybody who knows me, they know that Power Query is my most favorite feature in all of Excel. We'll close this for a moment. Looking on the Data tab, we get this set of tools called Get and Transform Data. Back in 2016, this replaced the old traditional file import tools. Now, I know some people are really fans of those old tools and like to keep using them and they don't want to learn Power Query. That's unfortunate, but I understand. We can add those older features back to the ribbon. So go to the options, go to data, and you can pick and choose exactly which of these legacy import wizards you want. So maybe you like pulling from Access, websites, text files, and SQL servers. I'll hit OK. Now if we go up to data, get data, we'll have a new category here called legacy wizards. And these are the old school import wizards. So if I were to say from text and point to a text file, then I'll get the old school text import wizard. Now, if you've never used Power Query, but you use this, I highly recommend you investigate Power Query. It is far superior to this. But if this is what you like, this is how you can get it back. So just go to your options, data, check as many or as few of these as you need, hit OK. And now when you go to get data, legacy wizards, you can have all these toys back. Now, one of the things that can be frustrating for Excel beginners is when they type in numbers with leading zeros. So let's say you have a zip code 00123. When you hit enter, you lose those leading zeros. Those zeros are lost because by default, Excel does not display insignificant digits. Those zeros don't add anything to the value of 123. Now, they may not add value to Excel, but they added value to you as the user, thinking, that's my zip code, I need those zeros. Or maybe you have a part number 00874. I don't want to lose those zeros, I need them. Well, if you don't wish to lose leading zeros, go to your options, go to the data category, and then right here, remove leading zeros and convert to number. If we uncheck that, hit OK. Now if I were to type in 00123, I get 00123. So think about anything in your life where you have leading zeros, like part numbers, phone numbers, credit card numbers, social security numbers, inventory numbers, whatever. If a lot of your numbers have leading zeros and you don't want to lose them, just turn the feature off. Now let's go back into options and turn that feature back on. When that feature's on, really the only other way to get around this is to preface that number with a single quote, 00123. That way I won't lose the leading zeros. But if you look in the formula bar, this has that single quote. When I turned the feature off, that single quote was added automatically. Just an interesting piece of trivia, that single quote does not count against the number of characters that are in the cell. So if I ran a length function on that cell, it would still be 5, not 6. The single quote is just a control code. It's not an actual living character in the cell. Now, another feature that I have found really upset some people was when they would bring in part numbers or some sort of identification number, and that number has an E in it, such as 123E5. Well, when I hit enter, notice how that's turned into scientific notation, because that E is how Excel understands scientific notation when you're typing in a value. The problem is, I didn't want scientific notation. I just wanted 123E7. If we go back into the options, go to data, and then deactivate convert digits surrounding the letter E. I'll hit OK. So now if I were to type in 123E7, it's just 123E7. Something else I've had upset users is when they're typing in characters that sort of resemble a date but aren't really dates. So if I were to type in JAN1, when I hit enter, it interprets that as an actual date, January 1st, 2024. But I wanted to actually type in JAN1. To prevent this date conversion from happening, we'll go to Options, Data, and then deselect Convert Continuous Letters and Numbers to Date. Hit OK. Now if I type in JAN1, it's just JAN1. This next option is something I definitely think you'll never want to turn off. It's more of a, hey, this feature stopped working, how come? Now you'll know where to go to turn it back on. This feature is used when working with proper data tables. So over here I have the cost and the sales, but I'd like to calculate the profit. So I'll write a formula that says take the sales and deduct the cost. When I hit enter, that formula is supposed to propagate down the entire column, but it's not doing it. I'm being forced to tell it to overwrite the cells in this column. That is normally a natural behavior. If that feature is not working for you, go into your options, go to proofing, and then in the autocorrect options, we're going to go to the Auto Format as You Type tab. And right here, automatically as you work, fill formulas in tables to create calculated columns. So if that feature has broken for you, this is the reason why. Go back and give it a check, hit OK. And so now if I were to write something like tax, and I'll say equals profit times 10%, I get the automatic calculation. This next feature is one that I rarely ever use, and that is the AutoSave feature. Now, I understand why AutoSave exists. because this solves the problem of people forgetting to save their files, and then their computer locks up or the power goes out and they lose a lot of hard work. Now, AutoSave does not work with locally saved files. So here's a new file that I've never saved. If I try to go up and turn on the AutoSave, it's forcing me to save this to some sort of cloud-based storage. So I'll go ahead and save it to my OneDrive account, and I'll just call it Test Save. Now, the reason I'm not a big fan of AutoSave is because I like to do a lot of experimenting in my files. Open up a dataset, try something out. But I know that experiment failing is quite likely, and I don't want to save those failed changes. So I always have to be mindful and go up and turn off the AutoSave. My problem is I don't remember to do that until I'm halfway through my experiment, and then it's too late. I've changed the file. If you want to be in complete control of when you save your cloud-based saved files, let's go into our options, and under Save, we will uncheck the AutoSave file stored in the cloud by default. Hit OK. Now when you open up this file, the AutoSave will be deactivated. AutoSave is already deactivated on local save files because you can't autosave to a local file. But at least now when you open up a cloud-based file, you're free to experiment without actually saving those experiments. If you do wish to have the AutoSave, you can always just go back and turn it on. Another thing about saving that kind of irritates me, and that is the interface. If we go up to File and we do a Save As operation, our Save As interface is the backstage. Now for a new user, this isn't exactly intuitive to use. Navigation, where do I name my file? What kind of file is it? I find this interface to be a bit confusing. So I always tell my users to go down to Browse, because if you're a new user, I find this interface to be a little bit easier, especially if you're trying to access network-based resources that are governed by drive letters. The other reason you might like this better is if you're kind of old school like me and this is just what you grew up with and you like it better. Well, I want this to be the default when I ask for a save operation. So I'll cancel this, go into the options, and in the save category, we have this option here. Don't show the backstage when opening or saving files with keyboard shortcuts. Check the box, hit OK. So now if this was a new file and we went up to File and did Save As, you can use the new interface. But if we do a Control S for keyboard shortcut, we'll get the old interface. Since Control S is usually how I save my files anyways, and I like the older interface, this works well for me. Our last section of customizable controls falls with the advanced category. Now there are dozens and dozens of options here, but I want to focus on 5 options that are very useful to people or sometimes get turned off and then make your experience more frustrating. Let's begin talking about what happens after you press the Enter key. Which direction does your cursor move? Now, as you probably know, when you hit the Enter key, your cursor moves in a downward direction. But what if you don't type your data in an up to down fashion? What if you type it in more of a left to right fashion? Well, you could change this to move the cursor to the right. Now, you can also choose to go up or left. I don't think I've ever seen anybody choose those, but they are options. Now, for me, the option that I change more often is just to turn this feature completely off. And the reason being is when I'm typing in a formula, and so I'll do something like equals sum, open parentheses, and I'll highlight some range of cells. When I hit Enter, my cursor moves either up, down, left, or right, depending on how I had that feature programmed. But when I'm teaching, I'd like the students to be able to still see the formula that I just wrote, so I have to move back to that cell so it displays in the formula bar. Now, I could do something like equals sum, open parentheses, highlight a bunch of cells, and Control Enter, and that will allow me to enter the formula without moving my cursor. But holding down Control is an extra key, and if that's the behavior that I want all the time, it would be easier just to go into the options, go to Advanced, and just turn this feature off. So now if I were to go in and say something like equals average, highlight a bunch of cells, hit Enter, and I just stay in this cell. Now this next option is an option that Excel, at least for me, will sometimes get turned off without my knowledge. And it's this option that was really the impetus for this entire video. The option I'm talking about is when I go to a cell and I type in something like January, and then I go to my fill series handle and I pull it down and I get other months. It's this blue button that pops up here called Fill Options that gives me alternate uses of the fill series handle. For whatever reason, Excel will sometimes turn that off. So if I went to a cell, I typed in, say, a date, performed a pull down with my fill options, but then I want to go back in here and do something like only have the weekdays displayed or just the months or the years. But for some reason, this button sometimes doesn't work anymore. If you're missing your Fill Options button, go into the Program Options, go to Advanced, and if you scroll down just a little bit, right here, Show Paste Options button when content is pasted. So if that's been turned off, you'll want to turn it back on. So let me show you what it looks like when it's turned off. I'll delete those dates. If I go back here, I type in a date, I'll grab my fill series handle and pull down, and all of a sudden I'm getting this different button. Now this button is the quick analysis button. Quick analysis is usually used when you highlight an existing set of data, not for when you're trying to control the options when producing data using fill. So if you're getting this button instead of fill options, we'll go back into program options, advanced, scroll down, and check this box. Hit OK. Now if I were to delete that, type in a date, perform a fill, now I get my fill options button. Now while we're here, let's talk about that quick analysis button, the other button that popped up. That pops up when you highlight a block of data. And so here we get quick analysis, so we can do things like build charts and pivot tables and do sorting and do some very basic things very quickly. If you don't use that feature, or if it's not working for you and you want to get it back, we'll go back into the program options, but this time it's on the General tab, and that's right here, Show Quick Analysis Options on Selection. So if you deselect that, hit OK. Now if you highlight a block of data, you don't get that button. So if you're not a fan of that feature, you can turn it off. I'll go back in, turn the feature back on, hit OK, and now when I highlight, the button appears. Finally, let's prove that 2 plus 2 can actually equal 5. In Excel, if I type in a number like 2.4 and another 2.4, if I were to perform an AutoSum and add those two numbers up, I'll get 4.8. Now we all know that that's the correct answer, but look what happens if I highlight these three cells and I decrease my decimal precision by 1 level of magnitude. Now my spreadsheet says 2 plus 2 equals 5. Now really it's 2.4 plus 2.4, and we're displaying it with rounded values. Now you can of course highlight these numbers and pull that precision back out and see the original data. But what if you want to type the data in, display that data at a lower or higher level of precision, but when you run the AutoSum or some other function, you want to calculate based on what you see, not based on what's really in those cells. So I would like this to say 4, even though these two values when added equal 4.8 and would round to 5. Well, to do this, we need to go into the program options, go to advanced, and if we scroll down about 80% of the way, there's an option here that says Set Precision as Displayed. If you check that box, notice we're getting a warning that says data will permanently lose accuracy. What it's telling us is those 2.4s that are over here are going to become 2s. The fraction will be dropped. When I hit OK again, you can already see in the formula bar that those 2.4s are now 2s. If I were to go to the bottom, perform an AutoSum, the answer is 4, not 4.8. So if this feature is on as you're building your formulas, everything will be calculated as it's visible, not based on what's truly in the cells. If you have a set of high precision numbers and you perform something like an AutoSum and you were to add all these numbers up, when I hit enter, I will get a high precision answer. But if I take those values and I start reducing their decimal precision, you can see that my answer is slowly getting chopped. The answer is being truncated based on what is visible, not based on what's there. Because if you look at what's here, the only thing that's there is what you see. Even if you were to go in and pull that precision back out, those original numbers have been lost. So if you've ever had any issues with rounding, this might be the reason. Now it's up to you to decide which of these features you don't need, turn them off, which ones are off and you do need, turn them on, or how to regain functionality of something that may have been accidentally deactivated. If you choose to use this knowledge for evil and not good, then I leave that reckoning up between you and your maker. If there are any other features in here that you think I should have focused on, let us know what those are down in the comments. Tell us why you like, don't like, or how to correct them. Thank you for watching, and remember at BCTI, the learning never stops.